Apparently you never got around to that Colorado court case that you like to cite all the time that says
Rob,
is an example
you realize
of
that I originally told you that they use a 3-point test and that when we went...
There were tons of these protests that occurred.
No, you're not allowed to say tons. I'm asking for particulars.
No, Destiny,
You're trying
I'm allowed to say whatever the I want. You don't control what I can say. And I understand that you want to be intentionally obtuse about this. Yes.
I'm being intentionally obtuse when you think it was illegal for 1,000 people to protest a federal law.
You wanted one. Okay, you wanted one. You wanted one. You just got it. Okay. Insurrection or not?
I don't know. I would need more information about this.
Okay. Well, why don't you keep looking, keep reading? You're clearly interested in this. You take insurrections to be very seriously.
Rob, you understand that I've written like 10,000 words on my research for this document, for the January 6th stuff, in which I have way more information, right? You understand that like the level of work I put into this, and then to give me, by the way, I had to find this. You didn't even know this. That for me to find this and read 2 paragraphs and go, oh yeah, I think that this definitely meets or exceeds my, I don't know, I would have to do more research into this. This is your example. I had to find this for you, Rob. You didn't even know about this one. I found this for you. So I don't know if I would include this or not. I'm not sure.
I knew in general there were protests of
No, you don't. You didn't know anything. You tried to pretend that me asking you for a particular one.
That's not true. That's not true. I knew in general there were protests against the Vietnam War that got violent. I knew that, and I knew that that would meet the definition of insurrection you provided. And I will allow me to finish. Allow me to finish. I find it ironic as you're talking about the 10,000 pages that you've gone through at January 6th. Apparently, you never got around to that fucking Colorado court case that you like to cite all the time that says is an example.
You realize that I originally told you that they use a 3-point test, and that when we went and read it, they used the 3-point test. I literally summarized it. And you know, Rob, you know that, by the way, you hadn't read that case before, because after you read those 3 points, you thought you had a gotcha, and you said, oh, and it kind of looks like they're not even using your test. Like you completely forgot that I had said multiple times at the beginning of our conversation, I think the Colorado court uses a 3-point test. Do you remember any of this happening at all?
Yes, I remember, and I remember specifically saying, as you said that and before that, that this is exactly what they did. My entire argument, and I've had this debate with Pisco before, was I was shocked because I'm interested in the obvious double standard of how these things are applied, that the Colorado court case refused to determine what insurrection was because they knew if they used like such as the definitions that they were using previously from the 1860s, that Black Lives Matter would have met that definition of insurrections many times over.
No, that's not true.
That is true.
You just don't know. You don't understand anything about what these courts do. The court is supposed to decide, ideally, the case before it. And the court isn't generally supposed to venture beyond the case before it. So when a definition of something like insurrection, is offered to talk about a particular event, the court generally isn't expected to step outside of the bounds of deciding that case. So you trying to say that the Colorado Supreme Court saying that, well, in order to decide this case, they don't have to decide exactly what an all-encompassing definition of insurrection is, proves that there is no definition. It shows you don't understand what you read, because they said just for purpose of deciding this case, and you don't understand what the function of a court is.
Again, I do understand
everything.
I do understand the function of court. I also understand the interest of spurging out when you know you're getting blown the fuck out in a debate, which you're prone to do. So what I'm saying is, yes, I understand that this selective court, much like many of the courts that have engaged in selective lawfare that we've seen over the years, it is true that in theory they're only supposed to decide the case in front of them. I knew that this was a convenient way, the fact that the Colorado court, nor any court in this country, declared any of the actions of Black Lives Matter, Antifa, etc. as insurrections, was very interesting. And I knew the fact that they were unwilling, even when they're citing definitions of insurrections, to just say, yeah, shit, this is the definition we're going with, that it would be used by people like you to say, well, technically they didn't even decide what insurrection was, so, you can't really then go back and say that Black Lives Matter is an insurrection. I understand that the court was not there to determine whether or not Black Lives Matter was an insurrection. I found it very convenient that they cited several definitions that would have meant that it was clear that Black Lives Matter were over and over again
insurrections.
What
does this have to do with Black Lives Matter? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
The court didn't have anything before it about BLM. Are you implying that the reason why the court didn't give a more narrow definition that wouldn't have even been needed to decide the case is because they were afraid of implicating Black Lives Matter?
I'm not saying that's specifically what their only intent was, but I'm saying it had the convenient after effect of that. So if we looked at the definitions that they used this is exactly how this came about, right? I read this part, I'm skimming through this, I read the part of insurrection. I'm debating with Pisco on Twitter, right? I'm like, Jesus, if we look at the definition they used for insurrection, which was, quote, a rising against civil or political authority, the open and active opposition of a number of persons to the execution execution of law in a city or a state. It's like, shit, that's basically what all defund the police were. Every movement that said defund the police, based on this definition, it is a rising against civil or political authority, the open and active opposition to a number of persons to the execution of a law in a city or state. They're literally protesting the police. Clear cut. Almost by definition, the stated definition of Black Lives Matter would make it then an organization engaged in insurrections. Pisco then correctly says, but Rob, notice that that's not the definition that they end up using. I'm like, what are you talking about? This is the definition that we should use. It's from the 1860s. This is from right around contemporaneously the time that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment was created, so why wouldn't we use this? He goes, no. They just said, here are possible definitions, but they chose not to pick one specifically. So you saying that Black Lives Matter meets that definition, maybe not, but that's not the definition that the court used. So that's how I was like, okay, now I got to read exactly what this whole fucking, so this was months and months before the Supreme Court even weighed in that I read this entire fucking Colorado decision, which is why I said, okay, I know exactly what they're talking about now. They're like, here's several definitions of insurrection, but we ain't going to choose one. We're not going to choose one, which then allows people that want to defend the double standard to say, well, they didn't choose one. They didn't specifically choose one. So you can't look at the one from 1860 and say, clearly this means that basically the entire organization of Black Lives Matter is an organization. Even though it meets that definition.
Wait, you could use that one though.
Okay.
Because they didn't tell you what to choose. So you could use that. If anything, this court case arguably leaves open even more BLM stuff to be challenged in the courts because they didn't give you a more narrow construction of what an insurrection would be that would exclude all of BLM. So what are you talking about? The fact that they say for the purposes of this case, we don't have to hone in on one, how does that protect BLM?
It protects BLM because the fact that if they would have used that specific case, and I'm not saying they did it intentionally, what I'm saying is may have factored in, but it certainly was exploited.
It didn't. You're wrong. That's not how any of this works.
How the fuck do you know? How do you know? How do you know?
Because I know how courts work. What do you mean? Nothing here prevents you.
Oh, so you know. So I just want to be clear. You know the intent of the members of the Colorado Supreme Court and why they chose to not take a specific definition. That's your argument.
I'm saying that the one that they've offered makes sense, so I'll take them at their word for it. The one that you're offering doesn't make sense. Yes, they did.
No, they didn't. They specifically said they're not offering an all-encompassing definition of the term insurrection.
I said the explanation for that. What was the explanation that they gave for that?
The explanation was that they thought that that this would have met any definition of insurrection. And you're literally repeating. And again, so two things. One, you're just repeating what I said at the outset of it. And second, it gets to the broader point, as someone who's fucking researched this so heavily and talks about this case often as, oh, well, there was a case where they ruled this was insurrection. There was the New Mexico case and there was the Colorado case. You didn't even fucking read the court decision, man. You didn't even read it.
I literally told you like 20 times that they use a three-pronged thing for their decision of insurrection in this case. How many times did you not?
So you did read it before. That's what you're saying.
A long time ago, yes.
Okay.
Or at the very least, an executive summary. I'm pretty sure I read the case, yes.
You read it before, but you were unaware that they specifically said we're not giving an actual definition of the term insurrection.
It's the way that you're phrasing this is not accurate. What did they say, Rob? Are you even capable of phrasing what they said?
Yes, I've done it like 5 times. Are you capable of
Phrase what they said. Phrase
right.
what they said.
There is a lot of varying definitions of the term insurrection, but we're not going to settle on one actual definition of insurrection because we think that whatever definition of insurrection we would use, January 6th meets it.
There you go. Correct.
Wow. No, do you want me to say? Now, this is very indicative of the style of debate that you do. It's why you want to have debates on the definition of insurrection. We haven't even got to the second part. We're just broaching it now. It's because what you want to do is just to try to get these little narrow focused talking points that could then define what the debate becomes. So then you could walk away and say, oh, January 6th, by definition, we could say was an insurrection. Now, fuck around and find out if you were those Trump supporters. Maybe Trump deserved to die, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, in the past, you've literally given the rationale for why you defend insurrections, saying that they're the other side of the coin of voting. And it's the same thing here. If you think that, I guess if your audience isn't so bright, if you have me keep repeating the point that I initially fucking made and told you what they said, that somehow that proves something, it proves nothing. I told you what they said. My entire point of bringing this up was we haven't had any fucking court cases for over 100 years, even though there would have been obvious examples under your definition of the term insurrection. No court cases brought in the past 100 years. Then we have 3. If the definition of insurrection is so fucking obvious based on the legal standard, why do we have 3 fucking different definitions or attempts at definitions given in 3 separate court cases? If the definition's so obvious, they should all give the same definition, but they didn't. It's almost like something changed in the past 100 years. It's almost like like they were like, we no longer view insurrection as the same way we did around the time of the Civil War, which is why no one brought up the term even suggesting Black Lives Matter, or suggesting things like the Vietnam War protests, or suggesting things like the attacks on ICE facilities, or any other number of things, even the Chaz zone. None of it was brought up. And you know why. Did I lose you? I did. He booted me? Wow. Really? A rage quit for the Destiny Miser. Wow. Now again, we got to talk about 10 minutes of what I wanted to talk about, and 5 hours of what he wanted to.